The National Assembly has agreed to the formation of a multi-party ad hoc committee to look into political party funding. A parliamentary inquiry will investigate whether public funding of political parties is adequate, but will also consider the need to regulate private funding. This inquiry will also look into donations by private entities and whether or not that should also be regulated. Also, it will also look at whether parties should disclose the funding that they receive from private donors. Talking to us about this issue now is Jackson Mthembu. He is the ANC Chief Whip and he joins us live from our studios in Parliament. Mr. Mthembu, it's a very good morning to you. This is quite a good move applauded by many political parties. But talk to us about what influenced this decision.
Thank you very much. You will know that about 10 years ago, the ANC at its conference decided that there must be enhancement of public funding to our political system. But secondly, the ANC also decided that, the donations to parties in our country is unregulated. It then felt that there must be some form of regulating the donations that we receive from private interest. As you will know, in many countries, the private donations are highly regulated to an extent that many countries ban foreign funding to political parties. Many parties ban what is normally referred to as anonymous donations. So, informed by all this, what's happening in the international arena, and also in Africa, by the way, this is happening in Rwanda, Kenya, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Ethiopia. As South Africans, we felt that we should not also do something to regulate the donor funding in our country or private funding in our country, and also make the funding to political parties transparent. In fact, political parties must disclose who their funders are so that we indeed reverse what is currently obtaining, where parties normally says that they are unable to disclose. We must make that legal, that parties are obliged to disclose who their funders are, so that all of us as South Africans can be certain that those who are funding our political parties and our political system are not having vested interest that is not in keeping with the interest that is enshrined in our constitution, and also that is not in keeping with the interest as enshrined in our political democratic system.
Yeah, and we do know that many political parties are in fact not comfortable with disclosing their funders. Some were even calling for the SABC, for the ANC, I beg your pardon, to disclose theirs first before they could. But transparency, Mr. Mthembu, how important is transparency in this matter, more so at this important time here in South Africa where corruption seems to be taking over?
Well, the reality is that when you increase, in our view, public funding, because we have seen that in many old democracies, whether the UK, whether the USA, whether Germany, whether France, there is adequate funding to the political systems from the public purse. Therefore, you are then able to say to parties, any other additional money you get, you are obligated to disclose through enactment of a legal instrument, or through amending current legislations, or through coming up with new legislation altogether. We believe this is possible, but of course, the modalities of how this will be done, the regulation of private donors, and also the ensuring that parties disclose who their donors are, the transparency that will be built in the party funding model in South Africa, that is what this Ad Hoc Committee that we all agreed to yesterday in Parliament will be seized with. I think they will also learn a lot from best practices in other countries, in Africa and everywhere in the world. But more importantly, you will also know that there's been civil society that has been saying to all of us as political parties, be transparent. Tell us who is funding you. We believe that they can also come to this Ad Hoc Committee and say, how best can we give effect to this transparency that civil society and everybody else in South Africa has been talking about. But we are happy that at least all parties in Parliament have agreed that we embark on this route. They believe that this route is in the interest of our democracy, but is also in the interest of all of us as South Africans.
All right. When is this ad hoc committee expected to report back to the National Assembly? And what is expected thereafter? A lot of analysts, or many analysts, are basically saying that maybe you're looking at a recommendation to say that government should give more funding to political parties. Is that the case?
The committee is expected to report back to Parliament by the 30th of November this year. Of course, you will know that there are so many competing and contending priorities in our national budget. In that budget, we must fund education, we must fund health, we must fund social security of our people through grants, we must fund housing. So all that we are then introducing is that democracy doesn't come cheap. You must also fund democracy as a country. If you don't fund your democracy, other people might decide to derail your democracy and your hard-won freedom that you enjoy through funding of parties. So that's why we're saying South Africa must discuss and indeed resolve, is it in the public interest to fund political parties adequately? You will know, as I also know, that at current, the only parties that are being funded are those at national and provincial levels. And we're saying their funding from the public purse is not adequate. At local level, including independent candidates, are not funded at all. So that's also what this committee should look at. What do we do to new entrants in the political system? What do we do to fund independent candidates at local level? But more importantly, we cannot allow a system where 80% of funding to political parties comes from private interest and only about 20% come from the public purse.
All right.
This indeed does not sit well with our democracy.
All right. No, we have to leave it at that for now, but thank you so much for coming through. That is Jackson Mthembu. He is the ANC Chief Whip, talking to us about the multi-party ad hoc committee that has been established to look into political party funding. Let's quickly take a break here on Morning Live. When we come back, we talk to Helen